Okay, everyone, welcome to this Active Learning Academy seminar. 18 months later, what we've learned. I'm going to hand this over to Kat Fuentes, who is going to kick us off.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm excited about being part of the Learning Academy. Once again, I've been here for 15 years and I always learn something new with every workshop and meeting. So today we want to talk about what we've learned since COVID in terms of course delivery. And that's sort of the big question. What's the best method? Is it face-to-face? Is it online? Is it asynchronous? Is it synchronous? And between the three of us, we've experienced all of these bases, and we would like to share with you some of the things we've learned that we can use moving on into the future, hopefully into the very near non-COVID future regarding our teaching. So I'm Kat Fuentes, and I'm a teaching professor and the undergraduate coordinator in the Department of Anthropology. Paloma Fernandez Sanchez is also, she's a senior lecturer and undergraduate academic advisor of Spanish in the Department of Languages and Culture Studies. And Celia Sinclair is senior lecturer and director of undergraduate studies in the Department of Religious Studies. So I will turn it over. I believe, Celia, these are your slides.
They are my slides, and I'm happy to kick off. And excited about this because I get to be the first person with the ALA this year, which is just an honor and wonderful. And I want to thank Jules for getting us all together and doing such good work. And Kat, I think it was maybe 15 years ago that Eric Mazer from Harvard came to us and talked to us about flipped classroom. And that was the beginning of a big change for me. This past 18 months has been the beginning of another big change for me. And so that's what I wanted to share with you all and get any kind of feedback from you towards the end of our time together. What we'll do is we'll each sort of present. I'll go first, and then Paloma, and then Kat, I think is the order, and we're each kind of talking about our experiences. Okay. So what I have is an asynchronous course, and I never thought I would do it. I have found that I love it, and I wanted to, if I could share my screen. Let's see, where am I? Sorry, guys, I'm going to, okay. Where are you? Okay. Do you see what I have here? Pandemic Pedagogy, the Facebook page. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. And I mentioned this because, of course, and there are a lot of you who are members of this Facebook page as well, but there are 32,000 members, educators, who started out 18 months ago with a teeny little Facebook page, and now it's grown and grown. And what I've seen, and I'm interested in it because it's helpful to me, but I also see some trends in there, and very, very divergent trends, because as we know, the pandemic has been an accelerant for change. And so there are people in this group and on our campus who are saying, I've had it, I'm done. I'm burnt out. This is, I've got to find something else. There's that for sure. But then there's also, and this is what interests me, there's also a lot of talk on there about, it's been an accelerant for change in a good way. And there's some things that that we've learned that we wouldn't have learned otherwise about what really works in the classroom. And so I want to go to, here it is. On my slide, I have this Rolf's model of reflection that I think nursing school uses, but the question of what, so what, now what has always been an important way of reflecting in my face-to-face classroom. But it's taken on a really different meaning for me now, because what I have done is I've put the what out. It's an asynchronous course. I put the what out into the students' own hands with their readings, their videos, the course content. And that's where the quiz comes for whatever the content is. The so what goes to the discussion forum. And that's my focus here. And the discussion forum leads into a now what, which is very much of a where do we go from here with this? And I'm doing a critical thinking and communications class of 2301. And so this kind of flow is important to me, that it's not just about content and getting it back. It's really about the analysis and then the next step. What I do and I know everyone does, I know this is nothing new, but what I do for my graded discussions is they're writing a whole lot. Granted, my class size is 35 and it's limited, but I ask them early on when they're available, and I put them into these groups. The group is going to read each other's work, okay? They're going to, on occasion, do some synchronous work together, perhaps, or if they want to. But so I do ask them when they're available to meet synchronously. But I'm not going to set that up. I'm not going to be there for that. That's their initiative. I do require that they have a group meet, and so that they can stay in touch with each other. But here's a typical assignment, 500 words, respond to 2 other classmates, and here's a very typical rubric for that. Now, with all of that kind of reading every week, I'm clicking through my rubric, and it's pretty basic stuff. But what I want to do is to give them some feedback. And what I've found, and this is between us, and I don't want you sharing this with anybody, but what I found is that I have the same comments over and over again, right? And so for each of my discussion posts, I just am copying and pasting comments to these students that give them really, really personalized kind of attention. They don't know that it's from a canned comment document, but it has been exceedingly helpful to me to have that. And you see, I start off with just your basic good job comments on that. What I've found, and I'm about to wrap up, is that from the midterm checkup, here's an example of one. I asked them what works, what doesn't, and to come up with a mean. But here's one student, for example, saying, wait, where is it? Oh, here it is. I love how in depth you get to go with the discussion boards and the personal feedback that you get from everyone. And so, and I saw that over and over again. So it's not just mine, but it's also the fact that they are really reading each other. And I do require 100 words. So it can't be just, thumbs up, but it really has to be substantive. And this thing, I never, ever did face-to-face. I never had that much writing. So that is a plus for me, and something that I'm going to take with me into the future. So I'll stop sharing and go back to Kat.
I just want to unmute really quickly while we're bringing up the other presentation and say I have dropped a chat in the chat asking you if you have any questions for the presenters as they are going along today. Go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we're going to have a Q&A at the end. Thank you.
So I think that's me. So I'm Paloma Fernandez Sanchez, and I am in the Spanish program. And a little bit along what Celia was saying, for me, this has been a huge change. I think I've always been editing my courses, but this has been major, and in a good way, I think. So when I was thinking about how to present some ideas and some, I don't know, some of what has worked and how it has worked, I thought that I would concentrate on 3 points, which you can see on the slide, and I'm not sharing my screen or anything, that's all that you're getting. So I have been teaching lately oral communication and also writing intensive courses, and both work for what I'm going to say. Most of my classes already had flipped classroom strategies. I also have what is called differentiated learning, which as we may or may not know, basically says that not every learner is going to follow the same path to reach to the same goal. And that we, as the instructors or the professors, should be performing formative assessment and then making the needed adjustments of instruction. And these two things were a major challenge for me, a major fear when we were pivoting online, because, okay, so how I'm gonna adjust my instruction when I am having all of these on Canvas, right? And the students are working on these asynchronously, because that's how I was teaching my classes when we went online. So I'm gonna share a few things that I did so that I could continue doing the formative assessment. So checking that the student was, following, learning, and how I went about adjusting instruction, how I did it when we pivoted online, and now I'm back face-to-face. So how I have had to edit or adjust again now that I am face-to-face in the classroom. So for formative assessment, I normally do very simple activities. Some of them are called exit cards. Sometimes I do enter cards, which is just a simple question, checking on either what we learned the day before or what we are learning today, what I think I need to know more, what I already know, where I would like to expand. It's also another version of that are the 30-second essays at the end of the class we have learned about. And so this, prior to COVID, it was working. I was checking on progress, but sometimes the truth is that sometimes I would rush through it at the end of the class, right? Because we have 50 minutes or an hour and 50 minutes, and then I will run out of time. So I will give it to them and say, okay, you have a minute to tell me about this. And yes, I was getting feedback, but it was very rushed sometimes. So when we went online, I said, okay, I want to keep doing these things. I want to know if it's working, what's working and what is not, and where I need to do more, even if it has to be one-on-one office hours or whatever it needs to be. So I end up putting those checks for understanding at the end of some of the quizzes or assignments on Canvas. And what I got, as Celia was mentioning, was a more detailed, more thoughtful responses. So the feedback that I was getting was great. It was evident that they were putting more time into it. They were reflecting on their learning more. So I was getting more out of it and they were getting more out of it, which is part of the purpose of doing these things. It's not just me getting things out of it, but the student also getting something out of it. So now that I was redesigning the course to do face-to-face, the question is, okay, do I go back to the exit card activity at the end of the 50-minute time in the classroom or not? And so what I have decided and what I'm doing is I just kept it online. So that's something that I developed or I added while we were online, and it's going to stay that way. And so far I have done a couple of those. We're in week 6 and I am seeing the same depth and the same detail when the students are thinking about what we have done, what they want more and what they are already done with because they already learned or think they have achieved that goal. So that's something that I have learn, and I think is making my class better. It's also allowing me to have more time to do more active learning in the classroom. And so moving the check for understanding somewhere else works really well. The other thing about adjusting instruction, that was not so easy. I would not say that I was very happy with what I could do when we were online. Probably something that I can improve with a little bit more semesters and experience. But what I'm doing now that I was not so much able to do while we were online, but is using all their answers, all their materials to bring them back to the classroom. So for example, as Celia was mentioning, when we're doing a forum, they will write a whole paragraph and it was great, or maybe it needs some tweaking, or maybe if we are talking about how you organize ideas, it needs some adjustment. So before COVID, I would use real authentic material, and I would be looking for that paragraph that has whatever issue I wanted to discuss. And now what I'm doing is I'm using everything that they are putting on Canvas. So before we go to the classroom, they have to do an activity in which they have to summarize the main points of whatever reading we have done. Now I'm using that paragraph to discuss in class whatever issues we may need to discuss, and to also praise whatever is being done in a very good way. And this again is helping, or is making my class more active. Is also making the student feel the class is theirs, because they can recognize, hey, that's the paragraph that I wrote. Hey, that's the sentence that I wrote. Of course, at the very beginning of the semester, I told them about this. Is it okay if I use your material, your answers? And a couple of them that didn't feel confident about it say no, so I'm not using those. It is also saving me time. And it's also putting the student, the learner, at the center. So I am not deciding, these are the issues I want to discuss. This is what the student is producing. These are the issues that are present in whatever they are doing. So let's use what they bring to the class to then go from there. So in that sense, that's another thing that I got from going online and doing the forums and reading so much in depth what they were producing, that I'm now repurposing or bringing back to the classroom. And I think it's making the class great. And in these 6 weeks, some students self-identified, right? I normally bring the example without the name of the student, and we start discussing, oh, I would do this, or what do you think about this idea? And then a couple of times the student, the author, stood up and said, well, this is what I meant. This is what I was trying to do. And to me, that's outstanding. That's the best learning ever. This student is not just getting feedback from me, written or orally, or however I'm providing feedback, but it's also having the opportunity of saying, but wait a minute, actually what I was trying to do was this, and then getting feedback from that. So again, an outstanding experience in my opinion. Just good things to say about that. And what if 1 week, because this happened, right? What if 1 week all the answers, all the activities don't provide me with material? Well, I have a great repository from past semesters, right? Because I have all those forums, I have all those answers. And again, every semester I tell that my students, do you give me permission to use your answers in the classroom? I'm not going to go and publish these things. For that, I will need other type of permissions. But so again, that's another way in which I'm using, and I'm finding ways of using and leveraging all the work and all the learning that I did in the last 2 semesters, 3 semesters. And so that links very well to accessibility. I am keeping all the recordings that I did of my mini tutorials about S, Y, and Z, because, well, I said I am face-to-face right now, but the reality is that some students are not being able to come to the class. And I want those students to be on track as much as possible and to benefit as much as possible. So having basically everything, or the core of it, I don't know if everything that we do in the classroom, also in a mini tutorial, in a video on Canvas, allows for these students to keep up. It also allows for the students that, for whatever reason, they were sitting in class that day, but could not, would not, I don't know, life was happening, so they were not getting all of it, or I was presenting a lot of information and whatnot. So in that sense, I'm keeping everything, every single thing. And finally, and with that, I will start to wrap up. It has also made that my class more cohesive, and it is allowing for more continuity in terms of assessment and feedback for the students, and they appreciate it. So Celia was showing us a couple, or a rubric. It took me a lot of time to design those rubrics and adapt them, but I noticed that the students are using these rubrics also as a tool. So go and look in the rubric. Instead of doing a checklist, before I submit this assignment, I need to have 1-inch margins, you know, all these little things. Go and look at the rubric, see what the rubric is telling you that we have been working on and that you should be incorporating in your work. And before COVID, I was also using rubrics, but differently, because I did notice that maybe the first assignment had one rubric and the second assignment had a different rubric, and they were both writing assignments, but you know, on the first case, I was concentrating on A, and in the second one on B. And now that I created the rubrics or adapted them for the online environment, it's the same rubric. Of course, as we move along the semester, we are expanding a little bit and we are adding more, but it's the same points, right? It's the structure, it's content, it's language, and it's those four over and over and over again. Language means something different in December than in September, but it's language. And this helped, well, at least from the feedback that I got in the student evaluations, this helps students a lot. So I'm keeping those rubrics too, in the same way. So all in all, it has been a great experience. It has been a learning experience. And these are three that I thought may be more useful all across different areas of study and less language specific. So, and that's what I have to share with you, and I would love to hear your comments at the end.
Okay, and I have many similar experiences that as Paloma and Celia have. So originally, several years before COVID, we started to get the push about, hey, we need some online classes at UNCC. And I thought, never in a million years, you know, I will not do that. That's not true education. It's going to be a sort of shadow of something better. And I have found that is not the case, and that it, for the right audience, can be wonderful. And when we were pushed to go 100% online, all of us, I did a lot of interviewing or surveying of my students. You know, how do you want this? What do you need? And of course, COVID is a different situation than what will hopefully soon be a post-COVID world. So many students went home, were sharing learning spaces, were caretakers, we have a large body of non-traditional students. So at the time, a great many said, while we may want or prefer face-to-face or synchronous due to multiple issues, we really need asynchronous. And so I've surveyed many of my students for a while now. And the bottom line is you can't please everybody. So, but there are certainly those out there who are looking for these online classes and asynchronous. So I wanted to know what I could learn in how to best provide an asynchronous class. And one of the main things students kept saying is, we don't like this big data dump, right? And of course, when professors were told, go online, I mean, our heads were spinning. It was happening so quick. I mean, I even remember telling my TA, this is just going to be a few days. Don't worry about it. We're not going to actually, So some professors were just sort of listing out, here's the readings, here's the quizzes, here are the assignments. And those students said that was very confusing. They needed a tour guide. They still needed our actual presence in their course activities. So I tried to figure out how I can best do that, but yet in an asynchronous class. So I wound up developing topic modules based on the week. And even when it's an asynchronous class, I actually give them a sort of a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, just a way to organize it. Because otherwise, if I just said, here's everything for exam 1, and here's when exam 1 is, like with the rest of us, many people will be waiting till the night before. So I break it down and I explain this is an artificial, it doesn't have to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but and I, for each of these, have a pre-recorded lecture. It's shorter than what I would normally do, but it helps guide them. So this pre-recorded lecture is my voice, it's me, and it's saying, okay, guys, if you're looking at your Canvas right now, you're seeing X, Y, and Z. Here is, here are the learning objectives for this week. Here's what we're going to do. And I cover frequently asked questions. I summarize reading materials. I basically guide them through all of the resources that they have for that week. And if they've recently had a quiz, for example, I review over that. So there are a lot of pros and cons to this, as opposed to actually being in the class. So for more than 15 years, for 20 years, better part of 20 years, I taught only face-to-face. So this was a bit of a learning curve. So some of the cons in having this pre-recorded lecture is I'm not in the room to gauge interest or disinterest or confusion. These sort of body language things that we can pick up in maybe synchronous online classes or face-to-face classes. I'm also not getting their immediate input or their immediate questions. However, they're still getting to hear me and have me explain the week's materials, and reminding them of the important dates and other announcements that we would give in class, and they can rewatch it. This is one thing that students really liked about the recorded lecture. And as Paloma said, I'm actually going to keep this, even as I go back to my face-to-face classes. I'm actually going to keep this part for them. But the students said it's very convenient to be able to rewatch and go back to material. What did she say about such and such, or so on. And another way that I wanted interaction, because it's important to me that we don't just lecture, but that we interact with students, whether it's a face-to-face class or online, and that they interact with each other. And so discussion assignments or forum assignments is the way that I've done this. And I usually have them, I'll have a list of questions, basically the key stuff out of the material, out of those resources for that topic that I really want them to gain. And basically this is the foundation for what will be their exam and other assessments. And so I give a string of questions and I tell them usually pick one. I might say pick two. I sometimes change it, and answer in X number of words. And then they respond to other students. And so the cons to this is, again, it's not that same interpersonal touch that you have when you're actually in class. So these discussion assignments, I use them in the same way that I would use class discussion. For example, who can answer blah, 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 and then have them answer. So I don't have that personal touch, and it's quite a bit of work, although I'm learning ways to do more with that. But the pros of this, so what I do is I go through, and for each question, I find a student who's really nailed it or done an exceptional job, and I'll comment, this is very good, and here's why. And I don't comment on everybody's stuff. I tell them that. And by doing this, they can go back in and read the student's post to which I responded and sort of gauge the material and their understanding of the material. And so where this really helps is, before, if I had students do like a written assignment, like an entrance, when you come in, answer such and such, we often hear students say things like, well, why did I get a C on this instead of an A? And we say, well, you really needed to cover X, Y, and Z in more detail, blah, blah, blah. And they're saying, but I did that, but I did that. Now they're actually getting to see examples, real life examples of answers that are nailing it. And I grade these things as really just pass fail. I mean, so they're still getting the grade, but they get to compare it to other students, and they have this in writing when it's time to study for the exams. They can go back to these discussion posts and say, okay, I need to know the answers to these questions or the information related to these. Let me read other people's posts. Let me go back and do that. So another pro, so it's helping, it's just like class work where I would guide them toward their assessments in a sense, like, oh, that's a great idea. That's, what the author meant, or, oh, well, that's a common misconception, what have you. But one thing I noticed is, and many of you have had this experience in face-to-face classes before, is when I have, whether it's a class of 125 or a class of 12 graduate students, you often have the 2 or 3 who share and the great majority who don't. And you may even have those 1 or 2 that like actively try to hide. When you ask a question, they all look down. And so here, I think students felt a lot safer expressing their ideas, because they're not having to verbalize them in front of people. They can think about it, they can type it, they can edit it. It gives them time to reflect. And so people are really giving a voice. And this was another thing that on evaluation students said, I hate to talk in class so much, but this was great. And similarly, I have in my writing intensive and oral communication classes, they're doing presentations. I in my smaller classes of 30 and under, I usually have them do a low stakes presentation because, as we know, public speaking is like the second biggest fear of humans, next to like heights, or for me, it's spiders, but it's a big fear, and it's a very reasonable fear. Your average person doesn't say, oh, let me stand up in front of a bunch of people who are all staring at me, and this is going to be great, right? And so I usually have them do a very low stakes presentation, just so if anything, they're getting experience standing up in front of people and learning how to communicate in a way that overcomes traditional, normal public speaking kind of problems, like lots of ums or jitteriness or these sorts of things. So they now do that in a recorded way. And at first, when I was teaching a writing intensive oral communications class that was the LBST 2301, I thought, how am I going to do this? And this was when we were mandated. How am I going to do this so that they're really getting a quality oral presentation and feedback? And so I had them record them and then post them, and then students give their feedback. And it actually turned out, and Paloma had said this before, that it actually turned out better. They actually learned more, because when they had to stand up in front of the class, and I might write down, and their peers might write down, you said a lot, you fidgeted with your right hand, you whatever, they logically can understand it, but when they actually see themselves do it, they say, oh my gosh, I never realized. Oh, and that's true for all of us. My husband always jokes that I'm like, the Kanzi, the bonobo, that I'm constantly, using my hands. And I often throw my pen at students by accident because I get all excited and talk. So you can see these weaknesses and work on them. And the other students still gave feedback on these. I have like a rubric where you need to comment on specific things. So that actually had the pros of getting them to really learn and to see themselves, and they get the multiple attempts. So they not only get to see what their weaknesses are, but they have a chance to fix them, which is the whole goal of learning. The real con of this, though, pro and con, is that they're not getting that sort of fear factor of one day you're eventually going to stand up in front of real people in real time. But at this stage of the game, I think the level of learning they get is worth that. And it may make them more confident and stronger when they finally do have to go in front of people. So going into the future, I will be back in the classroom face-to-face in spring. And I have decided, one thing that I always thought was so important, and we actually just got something, I think, from faculty council. I don't know if everybody got it, about possible attendance changes. I was always very much of a butt needs to be in a seat kind of professor. You cannot learn if you are not here listening to my wisdom that I am imparting to you. And now I'm actually taking more of a model like that, which Celia presented. And I'm going to give a lot of my lecture material, sort of the nuts and bolts, need to know facts and figures, in the pre-recorded lectures. So students who can't make it to class for whatever reason can still get that information. And I'm leaving class time for more activities, more hands-on, more kinds of questions. So I will definitely be taking some of this with me. And I guess in some, whenever I do evaluations and I say, give me very specifically what you've disliked about this. They seem to like these things, but you can't please all the people all the time.